So that is the situation on the ground. That is the situation in Embakasi area, even as the protesters try and advance towards, the JKIA, which earlier on, the acting IG of police, that is Douglas Kanja, reminded the public of the legal boundaries that govern access to protected areas. I understand now we have David Mudoka, if I'm not wrong. All right, we will continue getting David Mudoka, who is trying to, follow on those protesters who were advancing to JKIA through Mombasa Road. So that is the situation on the ground. Now, remember, earlier on, we saw President William Ruto trying to quell the unrest and conceding. We've seen him, drop the finance bill, and we saw him, drop the first and second ladies' budget. We equally saw him dissolve cabinet earlier on. And of course, the IBC bill that has been approved, not forgetting that the controversial land amendment bill, which was equally dropped. And what the government is saying is that we've met you halfway, and it's time that the protests and what we saw President William Ruto say on Sunday in Kericho, if I'm not wrong, or is it Bomet, that enough is enough and that he will deal with these protesters. But the protesters are saying, you know what, this is our country and we want it governed a certain way. We want accountability, we want transparency by the government, and we want the extrajudicial killings to come to an end. So that is what has led to these fresh protests that we're seeing today. Situation in Karatina, as you can see there, fires have been lit on the road, heavy police presence, even as the protesters try and engage police in a running battle, saying they're coming out in large numbers to fight for the future. On the right side, or is it the left side of your screen, you're seeing the heavy police presence in Embakasi, that is along Outer Ring Road, Pipeline, around Feather area there, where we saw earlier on those youth, that is the Gen Z, they're calling themselves Gen Z, chant anti-government slogans, and they're saying that they're crying the high cost of living. And what Jeff Magere has painted that picture of what is happening is that this is a residential area, and those protesters are coming out, and when they're being dispersed by police officers, they go back to the residential areas trying to get a different route, even as they try advance to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Now, we saw, in response to President William Ruto, a series of austerity measures aimed at reducing government expenditure across various state departments, including his own office on June 26th. He equally proposed cuts on operational expenditure, eliminated the confidential vote, and reduced expenses related to travel, hospitality, motor vehicles, and renovations. And we equally saw the president, that is, direct parliament and the judiciary and county government to collaborate with the Treasury to implement a budget cuts, emphasizing the importance of living within our means in line with the public demands. All this just to try and streamline a government. Now, how all this went south is when on Friday we saw President William Ruto, come out and name 11 cabinet secretary nominees, and not forgetting that he recycled 6, which fueled the protesters' anger online as they continued saying the president is taking them for a ride and not following their demands. What the Gen Zs are saying is the president is hearing them but not listening to what they say, and that is exactly why it led to this particular point where we are seeing, as you can see the pictures and Pipeline, some of those police lorries have tried moving into that Pipeline area, if I'm not wrong, if I didn't see, if my eyes did not deceive me. That is the situation, heavy police presence, and earlier on we equally saw that exit, that is the emergency exit to access JKIA that is usually used by officials, that it was barricaded. We saw police officers, police lorries there, just trying and prevent, just giving that extra measure to ensure that the protesters do not advance to JKIA using that emergency exit. But over and all, we saw less activity all through the day, all through part of the morning. We saw calm in majority of the areas in this country, from Kakamega, where our reporter Alan Ochanda did mention that apart from the fact that there's heavy presence of police officers, the situation is rather calm. In Mombasa earlier on, what we saw was protesters gathering, though not in large numbers, and the police were able to calm that particular situation. Tear gas was lobbed against those protesters just to try and disperse them. In Nairobi at around 1 p.m. is when we saw some action trying to take place in the CBD and also in Outer Ring, where majority of the roads were blocked by these protesters. They're using stones, they're using tires that they've lit up just to try and prevent any vehicle from moving about in these roads. And these are the major roads that lead to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where is the aim of the protesters. They're saying they're going to occupy the JKIA. Well, the plan as of yesterday online, and the reports that we got, was that they just wanted to have a sit-in, a peaceful sit-in at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, just to try and get the attention of the government. They want the president to just do one thing, just listen to their demands. And that is exactly why they're saying they will continue going to the streets to ensure that the country is governed as it is according to the Constitution of Kenya. So that is the latest we are getting. The pictures you're seeing right now are from Karatina town in Nyeri County. No protesters in sight, just police officers and smoke that is from a lit tire that I believe was blocking that particular road. And of course, apart from Karatina, what we know so far is what exactly is happening in town. Earlier on, our reporter David Mudoka did mention that there were some goons that had arrived in the CBD at around 12 p.m. thereabout, around 1 p.m. who are trying to loot, but the boda operators, that is the licensed boda operators operating in the CBD, tried their best to ensure that looting does not take place. Well, David Mudoka did mention that the protesters that were in town, though not in the numbers that we witnessed that Tuesday when they managed to occupy Parliament, were heading towards JKIA using Mombasa Road. And of course, David Mudoka is trying to, just follow those protesters, and we will report to you once we get that particular update. But as the situation on the ground in majority of the areas in the country, from Kakamega, it has been calm. And earlier on in Nyeri, before that is Clement Masombo went to Karatina, the situation was equally calm. We equally saw a number of residents of that town holding batons, and they're saying they're trying to protect their businesses. So that is the events, those are the events that we've seen, witnessed today. Not forgetting that Inspector General of Police, that is Douglas Kanja, he's the acting Inspector General of Police. Earlier on, he had a press briefing, and what he was trying to say is just remind the public of the legal boundaries that govern access to protected areas, warning the protesters that the JKIA is one of those protected areas, and therefore protesting there will lead to those police officers using force to ensure that they are dispersed and that the protests do not happen at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. He did mention that any persons who will be found breaking the law will be dealt with according to the law. That is, and those are the words of Douglas Kanja, who's the acting Inspector General of Police. As you can see there on your screen, live pictures from Karatina town in Nyeri County. What we're seeing is the aftermath of the burnt tires. As you can see there, stones are being used by protesters to just try and block the road to ensure that transport is paralyzed in that particular town in Karatina, as the Gen Z continue, reiterating the fact that they are fighting for this country. They say that they're fighting not only for themselves, but for the future of Kenyans and Kenya in general. So I want us to just, continue monitoring this situation. We're trying to get our reporters. Earlier on, we heard from Fred Kagonye, who was around Mombasa Road here at the GM roundabout. And what Fred Kagonye was saying is, earlier on, we saw some protesters trying to block that road, as it is one of the major roads leading to Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. But the police were able to handle that particular situation. Heavy police deployment has been witnessed across the country, not just in Nairobi. We saw vehicles, that is police vehicles, water cannons come out, being driven in large numbers as an indication that the police officers are ready to battle it out with protesters who are trying to advance to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Not forgetting the standoff that was witnessed around Pipeline and is still being witnessed as police officers engage in running battles with the protesters as protesters slowly advance towards Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Remember, at Pipeline, after that Taj Mahal roundabout, then next you can access that exit, that is the exit, emergency exit to access Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. So the police are trying their best to ensure that the protesters do not move past that point. Remember, earlier on, we saw the protesters advancing all the way from Outer Ring around the Githurai area, where there were stones used to barricade that particular road. And then we saw those police officers who were at the emergency exit just after the barrier, that the access to JKIA, move out in large numbers just to try and, deal with the protesters before they advance. We've seen protesters using stones as a way of retaliating to the tear gas that is being lobbed towards them to disperse. So that is the situation on the ground. Youth continue advancing towards the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport through Outer Ring. There are those protesters that came from the CBD who were converging at the CBD, who are also using Mombasa Road to try and access Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. So those are the reports that we have at this particular moment. Of course, we continue updating our viewers. This is where we come to a close here on Africa Speaks. But of course, my colleague from the business desk will be taking over on a Business Today, and we continue informing our viewers